The laptop screen glowed in the dim kitchen light, Isabella's unfinished manuscript staring back at me like a forbidden invitation. I hadn't meant to look. Her bag had tipped over on the counter, spilling its contents while she stepped out for groceries. But there it was, the title. Shadows Entwined, pulsing with promise. As I skimmed the first lines, a chill traced my spine. The protagonist, a freelance editor named Alara, shared my hesitant mannerisms, my quiet sketches in the margins of notebooks. And the brooding writer, Leora, with her late-night typing and enigmatic silences, was unmistakably Isabella. My heart hammered, the words blurring as realization dawned. This was us, veiled in fiction, our unspoken glances woven into a slow-burning desire that mirrored the ache I'd buried for months. Was this her way of confessing what simmered between us in our cramped apartment? I slammed the screen shut, pulse racing, the air thick with the weight of secrets now exposed. Our apartment perched on the 15th floor of a pre-war building in the heart of the city, where the skyline pressed close like an uninvited audience. The space was a labyrinth of narrow hallways and mismatched furniture, every corner echoing with the distant wail of sirens and the rhythmic thud of neighbors' footsteps overhead. It amplified everything: the creak of floorboards underfoot, the faint hum of the refrigerator that never quite silenced. I navigated it carefully each morning, my freelance editing work tethering me to the scarred oak desk by the window, where sunlight slanted through grimy panes to illuminate stacks of manuscripts I revised for others but could never finish my own. Avoidance was my rhythm. I'd bury myself in revisions, headphones clamped over my ears to drown out the world, stealing glances only when I thought she wasn't looking. Isabella moved through it all like a shadow given form, her presence a quiet force that reshaped the air. She was a freelance writer, or so her sporadic submissions to literary journals suggested. Enigmatic, with a portfolio of unpublished short stories that hinted at depths she rarely voiced. Tall and lithe, her dark hair often fell in loose waves over shoulders clad in oversized sweaters, her eyes a deep hazel that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She spoke in measured cadences, her voice a low timbre that lingered like smoke, revealing little beyond polite necessities. "Coffee's fresh," she'd murmur from the kitchen, or, "Storm's coming, lock the window." Phrases that carried an undercurrent I couldn't ignore, a subtle pull that made my skin prickle. In those mundane orbits, tension built like humidity before rain. We'd collide in the galley kitchen at dawn, her hip brushing mine as we reached for the same mug. The contact electric, yet fleeting, leaving me breathless in its wake. She'd pause, fingers hovering near the counter's edge, her gaze flicking to mine for a beat too long. A silent acknowledgement that hung between us, heavy and charged. Evenings unfolded in shared silences on the threadbare couch, her typing a soft percussion against the city's nocturnal pulse, while I pretended to read, my book forgotten as I traced the curve of her neck illuminated by lamplight. The apartment confined us, its walls a cage that forced proximity, turning every accidental graze into a spark, every exchanged word into a veiled confession. I replayed them endlessly. The way her laughter, rare and throaty, vibrated through the room during a late-night takeout debate. Or how she'd linger in the doorway after a shower, towel-damp hair framing her face, the faint scent of lavender soap trailing like an invitation. Yet I held back, my own longing a private storm. Freelancing kept me isolated, screens my shield against the vulnerability of reaching out. Elena's quiet intensity only deepened the ache. She'd leave half-finished mugs on the sill, steam curling into the night, or sketch idly on napkins, abstract lines that echoed the tension in her stories, full of longing and restraint. Our routines intertwined without merging. Her mornings lost to writing sessions behind a closed door, mine to the glow of edits until my eyes burned. But in the pauses, the shared elevator rides where shoulders nearly touched, or the way she'd hum faintly while stirring tea, a melody that stirred something primal in me, the chemistry simmered, unspoken yet palpable. It was in these orbits that I first noticed the pull, a magnetism that made the city outside feel distant, irrelevant. One evening, as twilight bled through the blinds, Isabella announced a rare outing, a writers' meetup downtown. "Won't be late," she said, slipping into her coat, her eyes meeting mine with that familiar, unreadable depth. The door clicked shut, and silence descended, thicker than usual. Restlessness gnawed at me. The apartment felt too still without her rhythm. I wandered to the kitchen for water, my bare feet cold on the linoleum. And that's when curiosity crested. Her laptop, left open on the table, screensaver flickering like a heartbeat. The city's pulse seeped through the walls, a constant undercurrent that mirrored the restlessness stirring in me. Sirens wailed in the distance, sharp and insistent, cutting through the night like unanswered questions, while the building's old bones creaked under the weight of footsteps from above, anonymous lives pressing down on ours. In that suspended quiet after Isabella left, the apartment amplified every absence. The air hung heavy with the faint residue of her presence, a subtle imprint that clung to the edges of my awareness. I stood by the window, glass cool against my palm, watching taillights streak below like veins of fire, but my mind replayed her instead. The way the urban hum seemed to fade when she entered a room, her quiet eclipsing the chaos outside. Isabella's habits wove into the fabric of our shared space, invisible threads that bound me tighter with each passing day. Late at night, when the city softened to a murmur, the rhythmic tap of her keys would drift from behind her door, a Morse code of creation that lulled and tormented me in equal measure. I'd lie awake, sheets tangled around my legs, listening to that steady cadence, imagining her fingers dancing over the board, crafting worlds from the silence we both inhabited. And the scent, her faint perfume, a blend of sandalwood and something earthier like rain-soaked pages, trailed her like a ghost. It lingered in the bathroom after her showers, mingling with steam that fogged the mirror, or on the couch cushions where she'd sat earlier, reading by lamplight. I'd catch it unexpectedly, a whiff during a shared meal or when passing her in the hall, and it would anchor me, pulling my thoughts back to her form, her unspoken rhythms. My longing was a hidden current, surging beneath the surface of routine, fed by those brief encounters I hoarded like secrets. I'd replay them in the dim glow of my room. The morning when our hands brushed, reaching for the creamer, her skin warm and steady against my cooler fingers, sending a jolt that lingered long after she pulled away with a murmured apology. Or the evening we'd both reached for the remote on the coffee table, knees knocking under the low surface. Her laugh, a rare velvet sound, diffusing the awkwardness, but not the heat that bloomed in my chest. These moments etched themselves into me, sensory echoes that replayed in idle hours. Her hazel eyes meeting mine across the breakfast bar, holding just a fraction too long, as if she sensed the undercurrent too. In the quiet, alone with my sketches, half-formed drawings of cityscapes that always veered toward abstract curves reminiscent of her silhouette, I'd trace the memory of her nearness, the way her sweater sleeve grazed my arm during a movie, soft wool against bare skin, igniting a spark I dared not name. Proximity in our narrow confines turned every interaction into a test of restraint. The kitchen, a mere strip of linoleum squeezed between counters, forced us into inevitable closeness. Brewing tea one afternoon, I'd turned to find her there, body heat radiating as she sliced fruit beside me, our elbows nearly touching, the space between us humming with potential. An accidental brush, her hip against mine while navigating the fridge, would halt time, breaths sinking in the charged air, her gaze dropping to my lips before flicking away, leaving me adrift in the wake of what might have been. These near misses amplified the ache, the apartment's walls closing in like a deliberate cage, heightening the intimacy we both pretended to ignore. The city's clamor outside only underscored our isolation, making her the epicenter of my world, her quiet intensity a magnet drawing me inexorably closer. That intensity fueled fantasies I kept locked away, born from the enigma of her. Nights when the typing paused, and I'd wonder what scenes unfolded in her mind. What desires she poured into words instead of voicing. The ache escalated, a slow unraveling. Her presence lingered in my dreams, hazy visions of hands intertwining in shadowed corners, whispers lost to the urban night. Restlessness clawed at me now, with the laptop's glow beckoning from the table, screensaver yielding to the document beneath. Guilt twisted in my gut, but the pull was stronger. I drifted toward her space, fingers itching to uncover the layers she hid. The laptop screensaver dissolved under my hesitant touch, revealing the document sprawled across the desktop like an open wound. Shadows entwined. The title alone sent a shiver through me, evoking the tangled silences that defined our evenings. Isabella's cursor blinked idly in the margin, a silent sentinel over lines of text that pulled me in, despite the knot of guilt twisting in my stomach. I glanced toward the door, half expecting her key in the lock, but the apartment remained still, the city's distant rumble a faint accomplice to my trespass. My finger hovered over the trackpad. This was her private world, the one she guarded behind that closed door. And yet the pull was magnetic, undeniable. I scrolled slowly at first, eyes skimming the opening paragraphs, my breath catching as the words formed familiar shapes. The protagonist, Alara, emerged from the page, a freelance editor much like me, her days consumed by the glow of screens and the quiet revision of others' stories, her nights haunted by unspoken yearnings in a high-rise apartment that mirrored our own. Fragile in her observations, she lingered in doorways, sketching half-formed thoughts in notebooks. Her world narrowed to the subtle rhythms of a roommate who moved like a shadow. And then there was Leora, the brooding creator at the story's heart, a writer whose late-night typing echoed through thin walls, her hazel eyes absorbing the light, her presence a quiet storm that reshaped the air. The parallels struck like lightning. Alara's hesitant glances, her buried sketches, Leora's measured voice, her earth-toned sweaters, and the faint trail of sandalwood. It was us, thinly veiled, our lives refracted through Isabella's lens, into something intimate, charged. Shock bloomed in my chest, hot and disorienting, mingling with a forbidden thrill that made my skin flush. This wasn't mere coincidence. The details were too precise, too personal. The creak of our specific floorboards underfoot, the way sunlight slanted through our grimy window to catch on a half-empty mug. Isabella had been watching me, not with indifference, but with the same intensity I reserved for her, pouring our proximity into fiction, as if the words could contain what reality denied. My pulse thrummed in my ears, a wild rhythm that drowned the urban hum outside. Part of me recoiled at the invasion, the exposure of our shared silences transformed into narrative desire. Yet another part leaned in, hungry for the validation it implied. Was this her outlet? A safe harbor for the chemistry we'd both circled without touching? I hesitated, fingers trembling on the edge of the keyboard. Guilt, a sharp ache in my throat. This was a violation, a step across the boundary we'd both respected. but the compulsion overrode it, a tide pulling me deeper. I clicked into the first chapter, the words unfolding like a confession. The excerpt began innocently enough. Ilara, alone in the kitchen, the air thick with the scent of brewing coffee, her thoughts drifting to Leora's return from an evening out. Then, the shift. Leora enters, coat shedding droplets of city rain, her gaze locking onto Ilara's across the narrow space. In that moment, their eyes held, a collision of unspoken need, the room contracting around them until the world narrowed to the space between. Ilara felt the pull, magnetic and inexorable, as if Leora's silence promised depths where hands might finally bridge the divide. Fingers tracing the lines of restraint they'd both worn like armor. The language was suggestive, laced with tension rather than explicitness, compliments woven into the observation. Leora's form described as a quiet force, her presence evoking the slow unraveling of guarded hearts. It hinted at charged glances, the brush of sleeves in passing, building a slow burn that echoed our own near misses, the hip against mine in the kitchen, the lingering look over morning tea. Realization settled over me like a weight, heavy yet illuminating. This captured our unspoken pull, the way Isabella's hazel eyes would flick to mine in the lamplight, holding just long enough to stir the air between us. She'd fictionalized the ache I felt in her absence, the fantasies I'd harbored of closing that distance, turning our mundane orbits into a tapestry of desire. The thrill deepened, a strange empathy blooming for her hidden labor. The nights she'd typed these lines, perhaps replaying our moments as I did mine. Guilt lingered, but the compulsion to delve deeper won. I scrolled onward, the screen's glow casting shadows on my face, the apartment's confines now feeling like an extension of the story's cage. What else had she woven from our lives? The question propelled me forward, overriding the last threads of restraint. The next pages drew me in deeper, the cursor's blink a conspirator, urging me onward through the digital veil. Isabella's prose unfolded with a deliberate rhythm, each sentence building like the slow accumulation of tension in our shared evenings, and I found myself mapping the fiction onto our fractured reality. The chapter shifted to a morning scene, Ilara at the kitchen counter, the steam from a fresh pot curling upward in lazy spirals, her hands wrapped around a mug as if anchoring herself against the pull of the day. Leora emerges from her room, hair tousled from sleep, her steps measured across the creaking floor. Our floor, with its telltale groan under the weight of bare feet. The excerpt captured their ritual with an intimacy that stole my breath. Ilara poured the coffee, the dark liquid mirroring the depths in Leora's eyes as she approached, their fingers brushing in the exchange. A fleeting contact that lingered like an echo, warm and insistent. Their gazes locked over the rim of the cup, the world narrowing to that charged space, where unspoken words hummed between them, promising the unraveling of silences long held. Leora's voice, low and resonant, broke the quiet. "It burns just right," she said. But her eyes said more, tracing Ilara's form with a hunger, veiled in casual regard. The air thickening with the weight of what neither dared voice. The parallels hit like a quiet thunder, amplifying the vulnerability I'd kept buried under layers of routine. Our mornings were identical. The hiss of the coffee maker at dawn, the way I'd hand her the mug first. Our fingers grazing in that same inevitable dance. Her hazel gaze holding mine a beat too long before drifting away. In the story, it was elevated, transformed into something electric. The brush of skin not accidental, but laden with intent. Her words a subtle compliment on the brew that masked deeper appreciation. Leora's observation of Alara's careful pour as a grace that steadied the chaos within her. My chest tightened, the screen's glow reflecting the flush creeping up my neck. This was no abstraction, but a mirror to the moments I'd replayed alone, wondering if the spark in her eyes was real or my imagination's fabrication. Isabella had noticed, cataloged these rituals, infusing them with a slow-burning desire that echoed the ache I'd felt during those lockings of eyes, when the city's clamor faded and only her presence remained, pulling me toward an edge I feared crossing. A strange magnetism pulsed from her words, drawing me closer even as dread coiled in my gut, the thrill of recognition warring with the terror of exposure. Her prose wrapped around me like the sandalwood scent she left behind, evocative and inescapable, each line a thread connecting our veiled selves. Leora's brooding intensity, her quiet storm reshaping the fragile boundaries of the room, was Isabella incarnate, her enigmatic silences now revealed as a canvas for longing. And Alara, me, with my hesitant sketches and freelance isolation, portrayed not as observer, but as the object of that storm's focus, her soft edges yielding to the pull of Leora's unyielding gaze. It stirred something primal, a resonance that made my pulse quicken, the apartment's confines suddenly feeling like the story's own cage, where proximity bred inevitability. Was this her way of processing a desire for me? Transmuting the chemistry we'd both ignored into fiction's safer realm? The question hung, heavy and unanswered, fueling a dread that we'd both be laid bare if she returned now. The manuscript's secrets spilling into our reality like ink on wet paper. Yet, I couldn't stop, drawn inexorably forward by the dread's counterpoint, a forbidden empathy for her hidden craft. The nights she'd poured this into being while I lay awake nearby, oblivious to the mirror she held. The excerpt's intimacy forced a confrontation within me, peeling back the denial I'd worn like armor. My own feelings surged to the surface, raw and insistent, the line between her story and ours blurring until I questioned which was the true fiction. The typing I'd heard through the walls now echoed in my mind as creation born of us, and with it came the ache of what might unfold if we bridged that divide. Hands no longer brushing by accident, gazes no longer fleeting. Guilt twisted sharper, but so did resolve. I needed to understand the depths she'd plumbed, even as fear whispered of the unraveling to come. The screen's glow faded as I leaned back, the apartment's shadows lengthening around me like fingers probing the edges of my resolve. Isabella's words lingered in my mind, a persistent echo that dredged up the ghosts of my past, those unrequited crushes that had left me hollowed out, retreating into the safety of solitude. There was the college roommate who'd shared my dorm with effortless confidence, her easy laughter drawing me in until I confessed one drunken night, only to watch her face shudder with polite rejection, the kind that severed more than words, turning shared spaces into minefields. Before that, a barista at the corner cafe, her knowing smiles over lattes, fueling fantasies until reality crashed in with her gentle but firm boundary, leaving me to nurse the ache alone in city parks, sketching strangers to forget her face. Each time, fear had rooted deep, the terror of disrupting fragile equilibria, of being the one who shattered the veneer of normalcy. Rejection wasn't just personal. It echoed through my freelance isolation, where screens buffered the world but couldn't shield the heart from its own echoes. Our apartment amplified that dread, its urban cage a relentless pressure cooker of proximity and peril. High above the streets, where sirens wailed like distant laments and the skyline loomed indifferent, we were isolated in our elevated bubble, trapped by lease and circumstance, the city's vastness mocking our confined world. Losing Isabella here would unravel everything. She'd become the anchor in this floating isolation, her presence the thread holding my routine against the void. If confrontation soured what we had, the narrow halls would turn hostile. Every creak a reminder of the rift. The kitchen a battlefield of avoided glances. The stakes loomed larger in this isolation, where escape meant navigating the chaos below alone. The potential loss not just of her, but of the fragile sanctuary we'd built amid the urban grind. It heightened the ache, turning our shared silences into high-wire acts, where one misstep could plummet us into irreparable distance. Yet admitting the obsession felt like cracking open a long-sealed vault. Isabella's writing revealed depths I craved, with a ferocity that scared me. Layers beneath her enigmatic surface, her prose a window into the storm she contained. I'd always sensed it, that quiet intensity, but now it bloomed vivid. Her character's longings mirroring the pull I'd felt since day one, drawing me to her like gravity in reverse. She wasn't just the shadow moving through our space. She was the creator, weaving our tensions into something profound. Her vulnerability laid bare in fiction, where reality faltered. I craved that depth, the uncharted territories her words hinted at, the way Leora's restraint masked a fire that echoed Isabella's rare, intense gazes. It was an obsession born of recognition. Her writing stripped my own defenses, forcing me to confront how deeply she'd embedded in me, not as roommate, but as the enigma I yearned to unravel. Her voice echoed in the excerpts, that low timbre, a sensory anchor pulling me back, resonant and measured, like velvet over steel, now infused with the story's charged dialogue. In the lines I'd read, Leora's words carried the same cadence, a murmur that vibrated through the page. The silence between us holds more than words ever could. A phrase that replayed her real-life utterances, like the time she'd commented on the rain against our window, her tone lingering like a caress. It haunted me, that voice bridging fiction and truth, stirring memories of her leaning close during a power outage, her breath warm against my ear as she described the storm's rhythm, the words embedding deeper than intended. Tension escalated, a taut wire humming in my chest. I couldn't bury this discovery, couldn't pretend the veil hadn't torn. Bridging fiction to truth meant risking it all. But inaction felt like cowardice now, the apartment's walls closing in with the weight of unspoken possibility. I grabbed a notepad from my desk, pen trembling as I scrawled a note, simple, vulnerable. I saw your manuscript. It's beautiful. And it's us. Can we talk? Folding it with care, slipping it under her door like a lifeline tossed into the void. The act ignited a firestorm within, resolve hardening against the fear. As evening deepened, the city's lights flickered on below, her key's eventual turn in the lock heightening the anticipation, anxiety coiling like smoke through the dim living room. The key scraped in the lock, a sound that sliced through the dim living room like a blade, pulling me from the window where I'd been pacing shadows. Isabella stepped inside, the door's soft click echoing in the charged air, her coat shedding the night's chill as she shook off the drizzle from her hair. The city lights framed her silhouette, casting her in a halo of sodium glow that made her hazel eyes deepen, unreadable at first. She paused, sensing the weight in the room before her gaze found me, curled on the couch's edge, the notepad clutched in my lap like a shield, the printed excerpt from her manuscript tucked beside it, its edges worn from my anxious folds. Tension thickened instantly, the space between us contracting under the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic pulse below. our apartment's confines turning intimate, inescapable. She shrugged off her coat, hanging it with deliberate slowness. Her movements measured as always, but now laced with wariness. "You're up late," she said, voice that low timbre vibrating through the floorboards, her eyes flicking to the paper in my hand. I swallowed, throat dry as sandpaper, the words I'd rehearsed dissolving into stammer. "Isabella, I saw your laptop. It was open, and I didn't mean to, but I read some. Shadows entwined. It's us." Her steps faltered midway to the kitchen, body going still, the color draining from her face as shock etched lines around her mouth. She crossed the room in 3 strides, sinking onto the couch arm opposite me, close enough that I caught the rain-damp scent of her sweater mingling with sandalwood. "You read it?" she whispered, raw vulnerability surfacing like a crack in stone, her hands clenching the cushion, knuckles paling. I nodded, unfolding the excerpt with trembling fingers, holding it out like evidence in a trial we both dreaded. The page trembled between us, the printed lines a bridge or a barrier. I couldn't tell. "This part," I managed, voice cracking. "The coffee ritual, the glances. It's our mornings, isn't it? The way you look at me, or I think you do." She scanned the words, her breath hitching at the familiar prose. Ilara's pour, the brush of fingers. Leora's gaze tracing with veiled hunger. Initial shock gave way to a flush creeping up her neck, her eyes lifting to mine, wide and unguarded for the first time. "I didn't think anyone would see it," she admitted, voice barely above the city's murmur filtering through the pain. "It's just a way to make sense of it. The pull. I felt it since we moved in, that chemistry humming under everything. But I couldn't say it out loud." Relief flooded me, sharp and bittersweet, as her confession unlocked my own. "Me too," I breathed, leaning forward, the couch dipping under our shared weight. Every brush in the kitchen, every silence on the couch, I've been hiding it, pretending it was one-sided. But your words, they captured it, made it real. We exchanged admissions like fragile offerings, her hazel eyes softening as she described the daily facades we'd worn, her enigmatic reserve a mask for the storm inside, my freelance isolation a retreat from the fear of shattering our orbit. "I type at night because that's when it's loudest," she said, empathy threading her tone. The longing, the what-ifs. "I thought you were oblivious, sketching away in your corner." I shook my head, sharing how her presence reshaped my days, the unspoken glances, a language we'd both fluent in, but never spoken. Laughter escaped her then, a throaty sound that pierced the tension, revealing the empathy we'd both craved. 2 women circling the same ache in our high-rise cage. Words faltered as proximity ignited, the dim lamp casting our shadows entwined on the wall. She shifted closer, her knee brushing mine, the contact a spark that held us suspended, breaths sinking in the thickening air. The silence stretched between us, heavy and charged, a tangible force that pressed against my skin, like the humid air before a summer storm rolling in from the river. Isabella's knee remained against mine, the denim of her jeans warm through the thin fabric of my leggings, an anchor in the dim living room where the lamp's glow pooled on the worn rug, casting elongated shadows that danced with our shallow breaths. Our apartment, with its high ceilings and thin walls, echoing the city's muffled symphony, honks and murmurs filtering up from the street 15 floors below, felt smaller now, the confines amplifying the unspoken need humming in the space we occupied. It was as if the walls themselves leaned in, complicit in the tension, the faint creak of the building settling underscoring the fragility of the moment, where every inhale seemed to draw us inexorably closer. She reached for the printed excerpt still clutched in my hand, her fingers extending slowly, deliberately, as if testing the air between us. I didn't pull away. Instead, I loosened my grip, letting the pages slide toward her, and in that transfer, our hands brushed. A fleeting contact, her skin cool from the evening chill, mine feverish with the weight of revelation. The touch lingered, electric. A spark that traveled up my arm and settled in my chest, halting time in the narrow gap where our knuckles grazed. Her hazel eyes lifted to mine then, wide and unguarded, revealing layers of desire I'd only glimpsed in her stories. The quiet hunger beneath her enigmatic reserve, the vulnerability she'd veiled in Leora's brooding gaze. In that pause, the world narrowed to her irises, flecked with gold in the lamplight, holding mine with an intensity that stripped away pretense, exposing the raw ache we'd both circled for months. The longing for connection in this isolated high-rise, where proximity had been both torment and temptation. I wrote it as an outlet, she confessed, her voice a low murmur that vibrated through the charged air, her hand still hovering near mine, the pages forgotten between us. The excerpts, they're our reality, filtered through words because saying it aloud felt impossible. The glances over coffee, the brushes in the kitchen, they weren't accidents in my mind. They were the start of something I couldn't ignore. Her admission hung there, resonant and intimate, paralleling the manuscript's slow burn, where Ilara's hesitant observations met Leora's unyielding pull, transforming mundane rituals into harbingers of deeper entanglement. I nodded, throat tight, the confession unraveling something within me. Her words echoed the fantasies I'd harbored, the way I'd replayed her nearness, the scent of sandalwood lingering after she passed, the timbre of her voice cutting through my freelance haze, now validated as mutual, the fiction a bridge to our truth. It's how I processed the chemistry, she continued, her gaze unwavering. The way your sketches catch the light, your quiet focus drawing me in like gravity. You see things others miss. And in the story, I let Leora see Ilara that way too. A grace in the details, steadying the chaos. Emotional walls crumbled in the apartment's unyielding confines, the high-rise isolation stripping us bare. Her vulnerability mirrored mine, the fear of disruption yielding to the pull of empathy, our shared silences fracturing under the weight of honesty. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sorrow, but release, as she set the pages aside, her hand finally closing the distance to rest lightly on my wrist, the touch tentative yet profound, fingers tracing a slow path along my pulse. The city's nocturnal pulse throbbed outside, but here, in our elevated sanctuary, the unraveling felt seismic. The guarded editor and the enigmatic writer converging, barriers dissolving like mist under dawn. I leaned in, my free hand rising to cup her cheek, thumb brushing the soft line of her jaw, her skin yielding under the pressure, warm and alive. The gesture tested boundaries, a quiet invitation hanging in the thickening air, her breath catching as our foreheads nearly met, the space between us humming with the promise of what lay beyond restraint. Her breath mingled with mine in that suspended space, warm and tentative, the city's distant hum fading to a whisper as the night deepened around us. Isabella's hand remained on my wrist, her thumb tracing idle circles that sent ripples through my skin, grounding me in the reality we'd skirted for so long. The printed pages lay discarded on the coffee table, their edges curling slightly in the lamplight, but she reached for her laptop instead, pulling it onto her lap with a resolve that mirrored the story's turning points. "There's more," she murmured, her voice a low vibration that resonated in my chest. "A scene I wrote last week. Read it with me?" I nodded, shifting closer on the couch, our thighs pressing together now, the contact steady and unyielding, as if the furniture itself conspired to erase the distance. The screen illuminated her face, casting soft shadows across her cheekbones, and she scrolled to the passage, the cursor hovering like a shared secret. The excerpt unfolded between us, words glowing in the dim room. Alara stood by the window, rain streaking the pane like tears unshed, her sketchpad forgotten as Leora approached from behind, a hand resting lightly on her shoulder. A tentative connection that blurred the line between comfort and craving. The touch was a question, soft yet insistent. Leora's fingers mapping the curve of Alara's arm with a reverence that spoke of nights spent imagining this bridge. In the storm's rhythm outside, their breaths aligned, the air between them alive with possibility, where restraint yielded to the slow certainty of hands entwining, bodies leaning into the warmth they'd both denied. It was tasteful, evocative, the language a dance of suggestion. Leora's quiet strength, a sanctuary in the chaos, complementing Alara's delicate focus, drawing forth hidden depths. No overt sensuality, just the charged undercurrent of nearness, mirroring our own brushes, but elevated, inviting. We read in unison, her voice joining mine on the final lines, a duet that wove fiction into our present, the subtext clear as the rain pattering against the glass. Her words weren't mere escape, but an invitation to real intimacy. A blueprint for crossing the threshold we'd both approached in stolen glances and accidental grazes. "It's what I want," she whispered as the screen dimmed, her hazel eyes locking onto mine, vulnerability raw in the admission. The story, it's my way of saying we could be more than roommates, if you're willing. The interpretation settled over me like a revelation. Her prose a lifeline extended across the chasm of our silences, transforming the apartment's cage into a space of potential rather than peril. But the obstacle loomed, sharp and familiar. The fear of disrupting our shared home life, this high-rise haven we'd carved from the city's indifference. What if this changes everything? I voiced the doubt aloud, my hand covering hers on the laptop, fingers interlacing tentatively. The routines, the ease. If it goes wrong, we can't just avoid each other here. The kitchen, the couch, it's all we have. She nodded, her grip tightening, the mutual vulnerability surfacing as she shared her past. A heartbreak in her last shared flat, where confession had shattered trust, turning a close friend into a stranger amid unpacked boxes and echoing arguments. "I built walls after that," she confessed, her timbre softening to a near whisper. "Feared losing the stability, the quiet understanding. It's why I wrote instead of spoke. Safer to explore the longing on the page." My own scars echoed hers. The college rejection that had left me wary of proximity, fueling my freelance retreat. The caution born of watching connections fracture under the weight of unspoken desires. We traded these fragments like confessions in the confessional, the night air thickening with empathy, our fears no longer solitary burdens, but shared threads binding us closer. Laughter pierced the tension then, unexpected and light, sparked by her wry observation of our literary standoff. Two creators circling the same narrative without a plot twist. It bubbled up from me, too, a release that eased the knots in my chest, fostering trust in the warmth of her chuckle, throaty and genuine, vibrating through our joined hands. The bond deepened, the apartment shadows softening as we lingered there, the storm outside mirroring the one within, now yielding to calm. Night pulled us toward resolution, the clock's hands creeping past midnight, her head tilting closer, the space between our lips a breath away from surrender. Her lips met mine in a gentle hold, soft and exploratory, solidifying the shift from her fictional us to the real one. Bodies aligning on the couch, arms wrapping around waists as the kiss deepened. A quiet affirmation of the slow burn we'd ignited. The apartment's confines transformed. No longer a cage, but a cocoon. Our breaths sinking in the lamplight's glow. If this slow burn resonates, subscribe for more layered tales that blur the lines between story and heart. The skyline twinkled beyond the window, our high-rise now a sanctuary of possibility, where sketches and manuscripts would intertwine in mornings yet to come. Comment your hidden crushes below, those unspoken sparks that linger like Isabella's words. Our story, just beginning.